If you're in the Minecraft community, you've most likely heard of Feather Client, one of the largest Minecraft clients out there, used by millions around the world. One of the ways Feather Client generates revenue is through the use of paid advertisements being displayed inside their client launcher. This is a fairly common practice among different Minecraft clients and launchers. However, it's never usually a main source of income or anything like that, just a simple way to make a little extra money without affecting the user experience. The reason for that is because there's these industry standards regarding what actually constitutes a real quote-unquote ad impression, which most companies tend to follow. According to guidelines set by the Media Rating Council, display ads must be at least 50% visible on screen for a continuous second or more in order to count as an impression and generate revenue. So if someone were to minimize the application or drag another window even partially on top of the ad, it wouldn't count as somebody viewing it. Like I said, in general, most companies follow these rules. Feather Client does not. Let me show you what I mean. Firstly, we're going to go into the Feather launcher, open up a DevTools window, and expand the layout in this specific order until we get to two entries titled Feather-Launcher-Add-Frame. In this demonstration, I have two because there are two ad slots here. For you, it could be more, it could be less, but inside each one of these instances is a web view loading a specific URL. These links essentially serve as a miniature web page running inside the launcher. Think of it like a browser source in OBS. That web page is the ad, and the URL is the address we're seeing the ad from. If we click on either one of these, go into the console, and run a command to open up their own DevTools window, then go into the console tab of each one of these windows, we can find something pretty interesting. Turns out, Feather Client actually left a little debug line titled add_filled, which only appears every time one of these web views refreshes and plays a new ad. As you can see, if I search for this in the console and wait for these ads to refresh. Now you may be wondering, why is a little line like this important? And that's because it exposes that even when these ads are fully hidden, completely out of sight, they still keep refreshing in the background like nothing happened. I even went as far as to run the Feather launcher on a virtual machine and completely lock the system. And sure enough, when I logged back in, the ads never stopped running in the background. And this is the core of the fraud. Feather Client claims to have over 600,000 daily active users. That's 600,000 people opening the launcher every day, booting up the game, and potentially leaving the launcher running in the background during long sessions, allowing Feather to quietly farm ad impressions all day long, likely generating a ridiculous amount of money. Now, there's just one problem. While this evidence so far proves that this fraud exists, it doesn't exactly prove that it's intentional. I mean, Feather and its owner Brendan have a bit of a history of oversights happening during development. If you know, you know.
To summarize this to better understanding, basically Feather Client took these mods without permission and they're making money off it while the mod creators or developers aren't. So they're capitalizing off of other people's work. And the biggest thing to understand here is they did this without permission.
So, after all, how do we know this isn't just one big oversight, one giant mistake? In this next chapter, I'm going to lay out the many reasons I have to believe that this is a planned operation. For those who aren't aware, Feather Client is owned by a company called Silent Stack, formerly known as Digital Ingot. If we visit the Silent Stack website, we're greeted with a list of 5 projects they claim ownership of. At the top is, of course, Feather Client, another unrelated project which we'll dive into later, alongside 3 other Minecraft-related websites, Minecraft-news.com, mcblockinfo.com, and mc-recipes.com. At first glance, these websites might seem a little random. However, it only takes a simple domain search to find something interesting. All 3 of these websites were created around the last 6 months as of the release date of this video, and within days of each other. And when you actually browse them, they appear to be entirely vibe-coded and AI generated. Taking a look at their most recent website, Minecraft-news.com, proves my point perfectly. Not only do they somehow have over 5 years worth of news articles dating back to 2021, despite the website only being created in November of 2025, math isn't exactly adding up. But clicking on any one of these articles will reveal a wall of blatantly AI generated text using the same layout as your typical ChatGPT response, containing random nonsense and, most of the time, completely fake and made up information. Alright, I'm on the website right now. I really just want to drive this point home of this entire website and all of these articles being completely fake. Here we have this article here, Community Build Competition, Winter Wonderland Results, from December 8th of 2025. Of course, we got the ads all over the website. This header image is completely unrelated to the article. The votes are in. After 2 weeks of incredible submissions, we're excited to announce the winners. And it goes and lists off these random winners. First place, Frozen Kingdom, and there's no pictures or anything to go along with the text here. Here we got our first place winner, IGN, Ice Architect _, except, oh wait, if you actually go into a Minecraft username search website, they're not real. Which raises an obvious question. Why would a company that owns one of the largest and most popular Minecraft clients suddenly launch 3 AI-generated Minecraft websites out of nowhere? I mean, these websites certainly don't scream a passion project or anything like that. In fact, I'm willing to bet they don't even serve a real audience. So what purpose do they serve? And the answer, once again, leads back to the Feather launcher. One of the very first things the Feather Client Launcher does upon being opened is send a GET request to this specific endpoint. miscellaneous-api.feathermc.com/ads/add-units. Remember those ad links we discovered earlier in the video? Well, if we take this add units endpoint and send a request to it ourselves, we can see that it's responsible for determining what ad placements to activate and which URLs to load inside of those web views. In the majority of outcomes, at least in my testing, the launcher will utilize a FeatherMC domain to display their advertisements. However, in rare cases, the launcher is instead instructed to load content from one of these other websites. To test and confirm this, I sent requests to the endpoint hundreds of times, taking note of each output. And while FeatherMC domains appeared the majority of the time, these 3 external sites, mc-recipes.com, minecraftblockinfo.com, and minecraftnews.com, repeatedly showed up as active ad destinations. The investigation process, the research, the editing for this video ultimately ended up being months worth of work to finish this project. This video is obviously not sponsored. All I ask is that you please subscribe. Anyways, if we revisit the Silent Stack website, we can see that the company boasts about having over 600,000 daily active users. Like I mentioned earlier, that's 600,000 individual instances of the client being left up for potentially hours every single day, with ads constantly refreshing in the background. That is a ridiculous amount of ads for one company to be purchasing for one website domain. I mean, we're potentially talking about millions upon millions of advertisements being purchased for the client every single day. In fact, it's such a large volume that an independent advertising analytics firm, Jounce Media, picked up on it back in October 2025 and included Feather in one of their monthly reports, noting that we additionally observed the emergence of one notable sustained shift in auction volume, digital ingot/FeatherMC. Feather rolled out RTB traded advertising in mid-2025 and is now approximately 10% of all available desktop app supply. Buyers seeking to diversify their desktop app inventory should evaluate Feather, and buyers seeking to avoid desktop app inventory should block this domain. In other words, it seems like Feather started scaling this operation around mid-2025 and has since pushed such a large volume of ads through the launcher that they began to grab a little too much outside attention, like the article we just saw. So the company created a few AI-generated websites that look just real enough to pass the eye test to act as distribution hubs allowing Feather to dilute the amount of ad impressions across multiple domains in order to sustain this massive volume without drawing any extra attention. On the surface, it appears like these ads are simply being served normally across different unrelated websites, but underneath, it all traces back to the same company. After examining Feather's behavior from the outside, I decided to shift focus and begin looking inward, extracting and analyzing Feather's source code directly. This chapter will be used to discuss the various anomalies I found in Feather's code while doing so. Reviewing the code was actually quite easy. As I've previously mentioned, Feather is an Electron app, and because of this, the logic is far easier to unpack and understand. All I had to do was go into my program files, click the folder titled Feather Launcher, click Resources, and extract the archive file titled app.asar, and we were in. One of the first things I noticed after browsing for a bit was a folder simply titled Add. Inside this folder lays some very interesting findings. For starters, remember how I explained that Feather uses web views to load ads inside the launcher? Well, one thing I didn't mention is that if we actually attempt to open one of those ad URLs in a normal web browser, the link simply redirects to its website's respective homepage. And this is because inside this ad folder, in a file called set_add_did_attach_webViewHandler.javascript, we can see that Feather intentionally adds a custom request header labeled xFeatherClient every time the launcher loads one of these ad URLs. In simple terms, a request header is basically like an ID card telling the website who's making the request. In our case, it's actually quite important because if we view this URL in a service like Postman where we're able to attach said custom header, now the response web page is completely different. This time literally displaying text that says Feather 400 by 600 ad, even though the domain I used belongs to mcrecipes.com, one of the fake AI generated Minecraft sites. This means that only when this custom header is present, which basically means only when the request is coming directly from the Feather client launcher, will the website switch behavior and deliver the ad. Very, very sneaky. What's even more deceptive, however, is that in that same file, Feather also modifies a setting called Set Background Throttling. Normally, when an application is minimized or not in focus, the system automatically slows it down and reduces how often things update, limiting timers, etc., in order to save power and resources. Feather purposely overrides this behavior entirely and sets it to false, ensuring that the Feather launcher and, in turn, the ad web views keep running at full speed even when the launcher is minimized or the operating system is asleep entirely, which, as we've already demonstrated, is what allows the ad players to keep refreshing infinitely on the user's PC, farming ad revenue and taking up extra resources without them ever knowing. Another quick thing I think is worth noting is that in this file titled setReloadHandler.javascript, Feather implemented code to forcibly reload the entire ad player window every 20 minutes. Now, I'm not entirely sure what the reasoning behind this tweak is, but considering everything else they've implemented is to seemingly help maximize the amount of revenue they generate and or try to cover up their tracks, I think it's safe to say that this follows those same goals. At this point, the pattern is hard to ignore. Which got me thinking, if all of this was intentional, there should be a point in time where it didn't exist yet. And you'd think the easiest way to test that would be to just run an older version of Feather, extract the code, and see what's different. However, the problem is it looks like all of Feather's older launchers are coded to automatically update to the newest version, while all previous builds are removed from their website. Thankfully, using the Internet Archive, I was able to download an old build of Feather from March 2025, the oldest recent version still publicly accessible, and install it offline to prevent the launcher from automatically updating, and extracted the code that way. We can now compare the two extracted codes side by side, seeing whether or not any of these additions, the custom headers, the background throttling, everything we covered, were added intentionally. And sure enough, Not only does the file containing the code for the custom header and the background throttling override not exist, the entire ad folder doesn't appear anywhere either, leading to suggest that this entire operation is a deliberate ad fraud scheme, which, by all accounts, began in mid-2025. So far, we've established how Feather is using the advertisements in their launcher to fraudulently generate impressions, the time period in which this fraud began, and now, undeniable evidence suggesting proof of intent, which only leaves one question left. The question of who's responsible. This is Brendan. Brendan is the owner and creator of Feather Client. To better understand the decisions behind Feather and the scale of what we've uncovered, it helps to look at some of the owner's activity online. One of the most revealing places to start is the Feather Client Discord server, where Brendan, surprisingly enough, has been fairly active throughout the years, whether it be through helping users with issues, answering questions, or simply interacting casually with the community. And it's inside his history of over 14,000 total messages on the server where we can discover some interesting patterns. One of my personal favorites being the overwhelming amount of times that Brendan has brought up Feather's financial struggles. In my short time searching around, I was able to find over 150 different examples of Brendan mentioning that Feather has no money, at some points they were losing money, him jokingly begging people to buy Feather cosmetics, that they're poor, that they're broke. I think you get the idea. These kind of statements go back years, ranging from just after Feather Client launched in beta back in February 2022, all the way up to spring 2025, to which then they stopped. I wonder why. Aside from just Brendan's personal comments, there have been a substantial amount of complaints in the Discord server over the past few months from people claiming that Feather is causing significant network and internet issues. They're almost always something along the lines of people stating that their game is now unplayable, and that suddenly, whenever they use Feather Client, their internet either slows to a crawl, is unable to load the game at all, or in the worst cases, completely crashes either their launcher or their entire internet network altogether. To which Brendan always responds by simply asking for their IGN, and then applying what is almost always the working solution of simply disabling ads on their specific account. Another thing worth noting is the significant lack of updates Feather has had in recent times. If we take a look at the client updates channel, we can see that Feather was regularly getting meaningful updates that added new mods and features on the regular, until, once again, around spring 2025, where the quality and frequency of these updates began to take a significant hit. Nowadays, the only messages in this channel appear when Feather gets updated to the latest version, or for something like a simple bug fix. All of these cases, in my opinion, suggest one thing and one thing only. Brendan no longer cares about the development of Feather Client and has since almost entirely shifted his focus on prioritizing making as much money as possible through this entire ad fraud operation. On top of just monitoring his public activity, my theory was reaffirmed after I was able to get a hold of an anonymous source close to Brendan, who's kept in contact with him throughout the entire duration of the ad fraud, and was able to independently verify the claims made in this video. As I mentioned earlier, the Silent Stack company is responsible for 5 projects, the most recent of which being a new website called AdRadar.io, a quote, analytics platform for desktop creators. As of right now, this is the only page on the website, so it's unclear what the purpose behind this project is, but I'm sure we'll see more soon. Naturally, I reached out to Brendan for comment with a short list of questions regarding the whole situation, to which a few days later, after a bit of questioning and suspicion on his end, he responded, and I'll leave that response here. But we're not done just yet. I was initially going to end this video after chapter 4. However, just a few days after Brendan responded to my questions about the Feather launcher, Feather silently updated their launcher, seemingly in an attempt to obfuscate and hide as much evidence of the ad fraud as possible via a few changes. The first of which being that we can no longer access dev tools from the Feather client launcher. Before, you could simply just do Control-Shift-I like you were going to open inspect element on a website. However, that and every other method I've tried no longer works. On top of that, the extracted code also looks very different. If we open this file right here, we can see that all of the code now looks like this. It is completely minimized. And while things like the set background throttling call and the X-Feather client header are still present in this file, they are way harder to find. I mean, I had to search for them, obviously. Yeah. What a coincidence, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. I know it's been so long since my last video. I'm not sure when my next one will be, but I hope to see you guys soon.